We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Wednesday, March 25th here in Seoul. I'm Isoo-jin, and this is News Generation. Joining us today is Wonbin.
Good morning.
Good morning. Also Niles with us.
Good morning.
Good morning. And both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. As we enter the middle of the work week, let's take a moment to step back from the daily rush and look at how technology is quietly but rapidly reshaping the way we live and work. From the factory floor to global supply chains, artificial intelligence is no longer a distant concept. It's becoming a core driver of industrial transformation. And nowhere is that shift more visible than in manufacturing, where some of Korea's biggest companies are making bold moves. So Wonbin, how are major firms moving toward AI-powered autonomous factories?
Yeah, so we're actually hearing different approaches from different companies in Korea. One good example is Hyundai Motors. Hyundai Motors announced that they will be transitioning their manufacturing process into an autonomous manufacturing platform utilizing AI and robotics technologies. For the viewers, Hyundai Motors has put in a lot of effort, time, and resources into the development of physical AI by acquiring Boston Dynamics in 2021. Now, if we remember the CES in January, Hyundai showcased their robot Atlas, a robot designed for factory labor with fully rotating joints. And if we remember, it was also popular for having a supernatural walk posture that would dramatically increase their work productivity. It was a great example of how serious Hyundai is towards AI automation. And for Hyundai, manufacturing was the biggest target for in terms of reducing cost, and automation can dramatically reduce the cost of manufacturing.
So what we're looking at here isn't just automation, it's a complete redefinition of manufacturing itself. A factory that runs around the clock, powered by AI and humanoid robots, really signals how far this technology has come. And Hyundai isn't alone in this push. So how are other firms also accelerating their shift to AI-driven factories?
That's right. Samsung Electronics also announced that by 2030 that it will transform its domestic and overseas production plants into AI-driven factories by actively applying AI across the entire manufacturing process. They also stated that AI will be used in environmental safety to proactively detect potential risk factors in production sites and prevent accidents.
Right, so this is a notable shift, not just toward efficiency, but toward smarter and also safer workplaces. And using AI to anticipate risks before they become real problems could significantly change how safety is also managed on the factory floor. So we're going to talk more about this, but first, let's take a look at the screen. Major companies in South Korea are unveiling ambitious plans to bring artificial intelligence into the heart of manufacturing, pushing toward fully autonomous production systems. While these innovations promise gains in efficiency, safety, and quality, they're also raising important questions about the future of jobs. Today on News Generation, we take a closer look at how feasible AI-powered autonomous factories are with today's technology, how young people are reacting to these changes, and how we should approach employment in the age of AI. As we just saw in a video, AI-powered factories are no longer just a futuristic concept. They're already beginning to take shape in parts of the manufacturing process. But that raises a key question about how far current technology can actually take us. So how feasible are fully autonomous factories with today's AI technology?
Well, automation with robots is actually already quite well implemented in multiple different industries, especially in manufacturing, such as cars and semiconductors. They use commercial robots and sensors to accurately build and inspect their final products. However, in the recent years, AI technology is allowing companies to leverage their current robot equipment and infrastructures by using virtual factories, which is used to simulate and calculate the optimal manufacturing productivity and efficiency. So this isn't a completely new thing for the companies. They already had automation in the system, but the recent AI technologies are allowing the companies to leverage it and go above and beyond.
But it still sounds like what we have now is still more partial autonomy rather than a fully self-running factory. So that brings us to the limitations. So what are the current biggest hurdles to operating a fully autonomous factory right now, Niall?
They're not fully taking over just yet. There's still no general purpose robot that can do everything exactly like a human. Humans still have to assess the situation, assemble the products, and solve problems when they arise. And the currently commercialized robots can only perform maybe one or two of these tasks. So fully automating an entire large-scale factory is quite difficult at this point. Additionally, operating a factory completely autonomously with the current technology would require massive data centers and GPUs. So that would make it quite difficult to maintain due to financial reasons.
Right, so while the vision is clear, the reality is that we're not quite there yet, both in terms of technology and cost. And that gap is exactly where a lot of the tension seems also to be coming from, so especially when you consider how this directly, obviously, impacts workers on the ground. So how are workers and labor groups reacting to these AI-driven factories?
Yeah, so like you just said, for the workers, it's definitely not the most ideal situation because obviously the AIs are coming to threaten and take their jobs. The Hyundai Labor Union actually announced that not a single robot will enter the factory before any negotiations or further agreements are made. And with this situation, there are mixed opinions regarding what's happening. Some are saying that they are overreacting, but some are also agreeing that anyone would do the same if their jobs were in danger. However, although there are some arguments, the workers do agree that the evolving technology will eventually replace and automate the majority of the tasks that they are currently working right now.
And I guess this shows how this isn't just about technology, it's about trust and job security. And as with many technological shifts, the reaction seems to be a mix of resistance and reluctant acceptance. But interestingly enough, the response isn't the same across all generations. So how do younger generations view this new wave of AI-driven factories now?
Right, so the MZ generation tends to view this issue from multiple angles, but they do worry about workforce reductions like the older generation. However, they do have lower expectations for lifelong commitments at employment and jobs to begin with, so they don't strongly resist it. They also place high value on work-life balance and tend to avoid hazardous tasks, so they see the potential benefits of these AI-driven factories, such as doing less dangerous work and having reduced overtime. As a result, they're relatively positive, surprisingly, about AI factories themselves, but their response may vary depending on how companies handle the job-related issues in the future.
So it is interesting to see that balance. Less fear, but also less attachment to traditional job security. So in a way, their response may ultimately depend on how companies manage the transition, not just the technology itself. So we also wanted to hear directly from our viewers. So we ran a poll on the Arirang News YouTube channel asking, what do you think about the expansion of AI-driven factories? And here's what the results showed. So opinions appear divided, but with a clear majority expressing concern, as 64% say they are against it, compared to 36% who support the move. So this is quite telling. Despite all the excitement around AI, a clear majority still feels uneasy about where this is heading, especially when it comes to jobs and long-term security. So to gain a more in-depth and personal perspective, we're going to talk to someone who has previously worked at manufacturing plants in the US. That conversation is coming up right after the break, so don't go anywhere.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search out channel Arirang News. Click Posts and cast your vote in the poll. Make a new type of news with us.
Joining us today is Choi Han-eun, who previously managed facility and equipment operations across assembly lines at 2 Korean-owned manufacturing plants in the US. So hello, thank you so much for connecting with us today.
Hello, thanks for having me today.
So how advanced were autonomous systems in the areas that you worked in?
When it comes to autonomous systems in the areas that I worked in, I wouldn't say it was much of autonomous systems. I would see more of the automated sort of the systems that humans have to involve. But there are some of the advancement definitely more recently. But then when it comes to, like I said again, not so much of autonomous systems I've seen for the past few years that I've worked in the factories.
I see. Thank you for your overview. Now, as we just talked about, now there's a transition of that semi-autonomous into the fully autonomous system. Now, how do you and your coworkers feel about this change?
Yeah, actually, my coworkers and I often talk about this as as more advancement comes in place in the factory. However, a lot of the coworkers think that it's not good. It's not good for themselves because they also could lose jobs. But when it comes to production and also pre-production stage of the factory operation, it still has a lot of the humans have to be involved in order to proceed to the next steps. Yeah.
Right.
So my last question for you today is, what are your personal views on AI-driven autonomous factories, and how are you preparing for it?
Yeah, I see the coming up, like for example, like Samsung and some other companies have announced, having autonomous systems by 2030 would be quite difficult to reach as in the perspective of the laborers, because a lot of the works that we have actually been involved in working those equipments. That's the only view that I have today.
All right. So you don't see it as very plausible for 2030.
Yeah, but again, it's when companies like big companies like Samsung, they announce things like that, and it's something that I'm not very aware of. I'm not very knowledgeable of, so I can't really say much about they can they can actually they will do it or not, but they said they will do it, so they'll probably do it. But for me to as a just laborer at the factory. I haven't seen a lot of the autonomous systems, so yeah.
Real quick before I let you go, you mentioned you managed facility and equipment operations, and you said some parts, while they were not autonomous, they were automated at certain aspects of it. Do you mind explaining like what parts or what kind of aspects of it were automated?
Sure. So in factory automation, as far as where I worked, there are a lot of the processes that we have to go through, and most of the process that I saw and I was experiencing had already been automated, and they are moving forward with less of humans handling. So that's what I meant by automation. But autonomous system basically means no humans, and it's not pre-programmed. It's learning by itself. So yeah.
I see. All right. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we just spoke with a former contractor, hearing firsthand how advanced systems are already on the ground, how workers are reacting to, and how he personally views this shift. And that brings us to the bigger picture beyond the factory floor. So how should we, Wonbin, approach jobs and employment in the AI era?
Right. So the ILO, the International Labor Organization, doesn't expect that AI will instantly replace every single existing job like we talked about in the interview. However, the role of humans in labor will definitely shift in some ways. This means that although not all jobs will be gone, there will be some changes, and we know changes always come at a cost. although it is against the nature of capitalism, the company should work out a structure or a transitions phase or a system that guarantees some degree of security and stability to the current human workers and laborers. And moreover, the government must also review and revise the laws to protect the laborers, but not prohibiting companies to completely use AI technology, as that may result in decrease of the competitiveness of our country industry.
So the key takeaway is a shared responsibility between companies and governments to cushion that impact. And for the younger generations, the question becomes less about fear and more about readiness. So how should the younger generations prepare for the AI era, Niall?
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned the government level and the company level, and on individual level, since the technological development of AI can't be stopped, it's inevitable. The AI era will indeed come for sure. However, I think it's a little bit early to worry in advance. The key characteristic of an AI era is not that all jobs will disappear. In fact, some studies show that it will actually create more jobs. So perhaps it's a different way of having occupations rather than the ones that we know from the past. But the era of doing the same job for an entire lifetime, maybe that is what has passed. Fortunately, many of the millennials and Gen Z is more familiar with the digital environment and better at adapting to changes than the older generations. So hopefully we will all navigate this change and situation as it comes along the way.
Right, I hope so too. So as AI continues to reshape the factory floor, the real question isn't just how far the technology can go, but how we choose to adapt alongside it. Balancing innovation with job security will be key to making this transition work for everyone. And ultimately, the future of work in the AI era may depend less on the machines themselves and more on how we prepare people for what comes next. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of News Generation. But News Gen will be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Korea time with more stories and discussions. A big thanks to Wonbin.
Always a pleasure.
And also Niall.
Lovely to be here.
And to our viewers, thank you so much for watching. And hopefully we'll keep using AI wisely while staying on good terms with the robots. We are
News Generation.